Hi, I'm Jennifer Chandler, and I serve as the Director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility for the CNCE. This onboarding briefing is for all people who are newly coming to work with the CNCE in any capacity. This briefing explains the approach that the CNCE is taking to implementing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility actions, and it provides a baseline of concepts and their definitions. My email is provided for you here at the start, and it will appear again at the end of the briefing, and you may email me at any time with any questions. We'll start this briefing with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the 23 Native nations that have inhabited the land where ASU sits in Arizona for centuries. Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on ancestral territories of indigenous peoples, including the Akimel O'odham, Pima, and Peepash Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands allows us to be here today. There's a lot for all to learn from their stewardship of the land. Here's our agenda. I'll be giving an overview of CNCE's DEIA approach, and then we'll go into some concepts and definitions. The briefing will conclude with a knowledge check or a quiz of sorts. There'll be a link that you can use to access the online quiz. And this quiz, the data are being collected from this quiz, but your email address or nothing that identifies you is collected regarding this quiz. The approach that the CNCE is taking for DEIA can be characterized as one that is focused on changing the environment, the human working environment. And this approach can be contrasted with other approaches. Commonly, programs to address the numeric underrepresentation of systemically minoritized groups in STEM have focused on fixing, and I'm saying that in quotes, on fixing individuals. What does that mean? Well, it means assuming that the academic performance of individuals whose identity components locate them in historically marginalized groups is not adequate, and therefore they need some sort of remedial education, or there are investments made in programs for improving scholastic performance, or there's assumptions that are made about people that in marginalized groups that they're not interested in the STEM field. So investments are made in outreach programs to try to spark their interest. And there may be many programs that provide research experiences too for particular marginalized groups with the intent of fixing some sort of deficit that those individuals have. So the main thing here is that there's this assumption that individuals whose identity components place them in marginalized groups, that they have some sort of academic or experience deficit. And these approaches that are deficit focused assume several things about individuals whose identity components locate them in historically marginalized groups, including that they are passive and that the way to make change is to either do things for them or do things to them. And this is not the approach that to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility that the CNCE is taking. All right, let's go back to CNCE's approach to DEIA. Changing the environment. What does that require? Well, here it is described as a willingness and the actions to challenge dominant frameworks of intelligibility that distort and dismiss the deep violence that marginalized groups experience on campuses and elsewhere. And further, There are individual actions that are necessary, and there are also changes to the systems themselves. And CNCE is participating in both types of actions. Another thing we need to keep in mind is that approaches that focus on fixing or changing individuals whose identity components locate them in marginalized groups so that they can succeed in a non-inclusive and unwelcoming environment, that can be evident and uninvited and push people away. And so sometimes those efforts can actually backfire and make the environment even less welcoming and less inclusive. So what CNCE is doing is focusing on changing the environment itself. And that means investing in short and long-term goals to accomplish lasting organizational change that is evident to all individuals involved with the organization. So who exactly is responsible for changing the environment? We all are. This is just a brief overview of how to begin thinking about these responsibilities. What we're all engaged in now in this onboarding briefing is part of this whole entire process to change the environment, to provide this onboarding briefing to explain to individuals what DEIA means to the CNCE, what it has been doing, what it's currently doing, and what it will be doing in the future to accomplish its goals. These are some recent or underway actions that the CNCE is implementing. Some of it has to do with the communication about the organization itself that appears on the website. Some of the actions regarding the wording that appears in job descriptions, and also the way that the job postings are shared with the larger community, and how the positions, how individuals are evaluated and selected for positions has recently changed. And then at the bottom are some changes that have been implemented regarding communications within the center. And all of these actions are in addition to the regularly scheduled interactive DEIA learning workshops that we conduct. This next section of the briefing includes some DEIA concepts and definitions, and also some of the results from the center-wide survey that we conducted in the spring of 2023. To start with, we need to recognize that some of the definitions we use in the center have to align with the definitions used by the funding agencies we work with. Here's one example. This top section represents the NSF definition of underrepresented in STEM, and other organizations may use slightly different definitions. So when NSF uses the phrase traditionally underrepresented in STEM, this is what they're referring to, A through E. So they're including the underrepresented, what they're calling racial minorities. They're also including people who do not identify with a gender binary structure, people who do not identify as heterosexual, people with a disability, and people who are or were first generation students or from low-income backgrounds. A more broader definition of marginalized groups is also provided here. The understanding of marginalized groups is something that shifts and changes depending on the larger social context that one is considering. The next set of slides includes data from the survey we conducted in 2023. There were 4 possible responses that participants could select, and those appear at the top here. The individual could select 0, which means I don't think this concept has any relevance for the CNCE. Or 1 meant I may have heard of this concept, but I don't fully understand it enough to apply it or discuss it within the CNCE. A 2 meant I do understand this concept, but I don't apply it nor discuss it within the CNCE. And a 3 was to indicate I understand this concept, I apply it in my work within the CNCE, and I discuss it with others in the CNCE. The numerical averages that appear next to each concept and its definitions for the rest of these slides we're going to go through. The ones that are highlighted green are ones that many of the CNCE respondents indicated that they do understand it and they already apply and discuss it within the CNCE. The blue ones are ones where very few individuals in the center understand it and are applying it. And the tan ones, or orange, whatever you call that other color there, those are middling scores that ideally would be higher so that those foundational concepts were more broadly understood and applied within the center. So let's go through the next 6 slides of the rest of these concepts. And you can always pause the recording to read all of the items, as I will only be touching on some of them. In this set of concepts and their definitions, we see that cultural appropriation and decolonization are not concepts that are currently broadly understood within the center, but that diversity is. Additionally, disability is another foundational concept that requires everyone to understand it well in order to support and accomplish the center's DEIA goals. In this set of concepts and definitions, we see that the members of the CNCE already indicate pretty broad understanding of equity, and they apply that within the center. But the other concepts are a little less broadly understood, and those are discrimination, gender identity, gender nonconforming, and harassment. And again, ideally, because those are foundational concepts, there would be an increase in the level of understanding and application of those concepts within the center. In this set of concepts and definitions, we see that the members of the center already indicate pretty broad understanding of inclusion. But the implicit bias is an area that is less well understood a little bit, and the concept of isms, sexism, classism, ageism, heterosexism, anti-Semitism, racism, those are just examples, but that concept is less well understood. In this set of concepts and definitions, we see that the members of the center don't all have an understanding of patriarchy or the other concepts on this slide. And I will bring to your attention microaggression. That was the workshop learning topic for our interactive workshop that we held in the fall of 2023. Patriarchy, it's possible that the term itself is unfamiliar to people. And it's simply the actions and beliefs that prioritizes masculinity. So one of the examples of it is the use of the pronoun he to refer to any particular individual who is unknown. It's referred to if in a conversation or in a classroom, an individual was referring to an engineer or a scientist or a doctor as an example individual, not referring to an actual individual, and the pronoun he is used, even though it's not referring to any actual individual. That's an example of patriarchy. Here we have more concepts that pertain to DEIA, and again you can see where the center respondents regarding their understanding and use of these concepts within the center varied. People of color, sexual orientation, social justice, and stereotype. This is our last slide of concepts and definitions. And for these, the numbers were all rather low, indicating that these are areas for growth for the center. Structural inequality, system of oppression, tokenism, and white supremacy. The concepts that appeared in blue or tan are the ones that are likely to be addressed in upcoming CNCE DEIA interactive learning workshops. This concludes the DEIA onboarding briefing. Please use this link or the QR code provided to access the knowledge check quiz and complete that. Thank you very much.